Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. I feel that time has come where once again we enter a new world order. It looks like the global financial system we use today has run its course. The pandemic has weakened all global currencies due to governments having to borrow so much and reduce rates to get us through COVID via the practices they deemed necessary. But we've gone from one black swan event to another tragic black swan event. We were already feeling inflation across the world, some of it due to supply chains, but a lot also attributed to these extreme monetary policies. And just as it felt like we were coming out of COVID and we could start making plans for life to return to normal, we enter devastating war and destruction. The most important New World Orders we've seen over the last century that reflect where the global financial system is today, well, we could start with Bretton Woods. In economics, this is a very important time. After the Second World War, Europe was destroyed and broke. The US was left standing and the wealthiest nation on the planet. National debts were at record highs for most nations. Something had to be done. The US dollar was still on the gold reserve and ended up becoming the global currency that all other nations would back their currency on. Then came the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, which went successfully. The world turned to a global currency that was backed by gold, except the US printed more dollars and other nations worked out that there wasn't enough gold for such spending and wanted to convert their US dollars to gold. Nixon took swift action and without the Senate or Congress took the US dollar off the gold reserve, which was literally the same as stealing all other nations' and citizens' gold reserves that were backed by US dollars. We then saw insane levels of inflation. Stocks and property increased too, as people wanted real assets, and the US dollar just became a fiat currency. Of course, the US dollar quickly became backed by oil, with the petrodollar. To sum up two very major events in just a couple of paragraphs. And here we are today. The dollar has once again inflated, except there is no lifeline this time of taking the dollar off the gold standard. To quote one of the greatest economic minds of the 20th century, von Mises, government is the only institution that can take a valuable commodity like paper and make it worthless by applying ink. Except now we have war too, and oil prices up well over 50% from the start of the year. That is an insane jump and will be felt massively in the global economy, along with commodity prices rising, including basics like flour. This is getting serious. We're also seeing lithium and nickel prices spike too. I would say it likely this is all temporary and should eventually return to some normality. Tesla has long-term mining contracts and have surely hedged all of this. I don't think this will impact Tesla's costs greatly, especially not compared to the competition. Oil is inelastic. No matter what price it is, we still need it, or there is famine. It is essential. It just goes to show how dependent on oil we are. We often don't realize it until it's presented like this. Companies like Tesla make the world so much better by centralizing energy and transport. Sourcing oil and refining it is not feasible or even possible for many nations. However, if a nation can run on EVs and solar, then they don't need fossil fuel dependency. The inflation is one element that we're seeing in the global financial system, but we've also just witnessed another. If governments don't like you or what you're doing, then you could be deleted from the banking system. You can have your accounts frozen or assets seized, similar to what we saw with the Canadian truck drivers, but also with the largest nation on the planet. Russia is being deleted from the global economy. The governments have shown their hands. Now this is a wake-up call to many people, organizations and nations. This is pretty serious. Finance is centralized too. Except of course we do have DeFi now, with cryptos. Well, Bitcoin. Personally, I don't think any of the other major cryptos are properly decentralized. Honestly, Bitcoin is to cryptos like Tesla is to EVs. There's no one else close. No, not even Doge. I don't know why Elon pumps Doge. My guess is it's a way to sandbag Bitcoin maybe, but just remember, it's Bitcoin on Tesla's balance sheet, and it was Bitcoin that Tesla accepted as payments for vehicles. I know Doge is accepted to buy some items online, but it's just novelty. The buck doesn't stop there, and I'm talking about the literal buck, i.e. the dollar. The buck was derived from when people used to use deerskin as money, if I recall in Canada, a buck being a male deer. Yeah, it's not just money that people, organizations and nations are realizing how little control they have. No, it's everything. But currently energy. This is not a new lesson. This was well established back in the 70s when we had the oil crisis. Prior to this, oil was very cheap, hence why Cadillac would have cars that had engines as big as 9 litres. Can you imagine how much gas that would consume? The big three US autos were allowed to be as complacent as they liked. They were paid up in cronyism to stop any potential threat of domestic competition, and it worked. No need to be innovative, and American cars were still a lot of car for the money. I remember when I was a kid and my dad would take us to America on holiday. The rental cars we would get were always so exciting. They were enormous and had luxuries like electric windows, leather electric seats, and air conditioning. Like I said, you got a lot of car for the money, but America got a big shock when the Middle East demonstrated to the world how much power they hold. It was brought on by the Yom Kippur War and the Middle East retaliation to the support the US gave Israel. This was capitalist warfare too, the Middle East using its powers to control a war, very similar to what we are seeing Russia do here. Okay, this resulted in the oil shock, and it wasn't just the US, other countries too, but a big wake-up call to America, the wealthiest nation on earth, who realizes a small little desert in the world controls their entire existence. And America managed to remove themselves off the dependency on oil from the Middle East. I mean, what's the point of having oil if you can't depend on it continually, as at any time if it stops, your nation grinds to a halt and famine would spread? It's major. And it's not just oil, but all energy too. All nations will now be scrambling for sovereign energy. Due to the fact we now realize that we cannot necessarily depend on other nations for energy and oil, then each nation will likely be doing what they can to mitigate this issue as much as possible. In economics, we talk about domestic production and how some domestic industries need to be kept going, even when there are superior, lower cost versions from overseas, and the local supply may need to be subsidized even as a result. Well, this is partly why. What if there is a war or something, and suddenly you can no longer source your essential items? The knowledge, experience and technologies of producing said goods would have been lost. The example that tends to pop up in economics books is the shears and scissors industry. The US can import low-cost scissors from China, for example. They close down their scissor manufacturing plants and forget how to make them. It's not necessary anymore. Competitive advantage of nations and all that. Then, if there was a war, and suddenly the US can't import scissors anymore, and they've forgotten how to make them. Like I said, this tends to be the textbook example, but think further. Think about the likes of aircraft manufacturing and how important it would have been to remember to know how to make planes in the time of war. Of course, NASA is also under this category. COVID opened our eyes on how dependent we are on Taiwan for semiconductors, and now there'll be a lot more locally produced semiconductor fabs. The world is better off economically with global trade. Entering the global market and WTO, well, that takes your nation out of poverty, like we saw with China, or the Asian tigers, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore and South Korea, or even the transformation of Japan after the war, becoming the world's richest nation in history, until it wasn't. Nations will scramble to set up their global independence to become as self-sufficient as possible. This may result in less global trade, less manufacturing outsourced overseas, likely resulting in further manufacturing innovation. This is what happens when you have low-cost labour. Innovation suffers. Manufacturing was sourced to the largest army of low-cost labour on the planet. Innovation in manufacturing has not come far. Of course not until Tesla got involved and realised no manufacturing process on the planet right now is capable of making enough EVs and batteries, and Tesla had no choice but to innovate. I would expect that this would mean a lot of manufacturing jobs return to the US. This would obviously increase the price of goods, although we're now circumventing the insane shipping prices. Also, we don't know how much longer China can peg themselves to the dollar if currencies collapse. China could also be in a position now to be self-sufficient. However, it would be tougher for other nations to support themselves without international dependence. In the US, there could be negative unemployment rates, as it once again becomes a nation of manufacturing. Some companies will likely set up more local manufacturing factories to provide the local market. For example, Nike might have a factory in the UK to serve the UK market, similar to what Tesla are already doing now. Wow, how did Elon see this coming already? Anyone here seriously impressed? More 4D chess moves? Elon can see about 10 moves ahead at this stage. Due to higher cost labour in these developed nations with manufacturing jobs that were previously outsourced, this will increase the cost of all goods produced, which again will inspire more innovation. Suddenly, if a machine can replace more valuable labour, making said machine more valuable, it was complacent to just hand over manufacturing to low-cost labour. It holds back innovation. Look at the South in the US. Using slavery held them back. Less incentive to innovate if you don't have to do the work. Despite the goods becoming more expensive, as there'll be so much more employment, then wages will rise to adjust. That eventually we hope that the average person can afford, e.g. a pair of locally produced Nike shoes. I don't know to what extreme we might see these in all honesty. I'm just presenting the concept and thinking it through. Obviously, several other economists would come up with several other possibilities. So please tell me your thoughts too on how you think some of this will play out. Nike was just an example, and I don't think it would go to that extreme. I think nations mainly don't want any other nations to have so much control or power over them with trade that they could send their nation into famine if they so chose. We depend on other nations to keep us going. All nations are interwoven into international commerce. It's like trying to separate the egg from a pancake. Of course, minerals and resources from mining obviously depend on only nations that have those locally sourced. We thought climate control was going to be the major mover for Tesla, but this nationalist movement is going to further catalyse the entire industry. The decentralization of energy and transport that I've been talking about a bit last year, I was generally referring mainly to the individual, but it's just as relevant to a nation. Obviously, solar and battery is a path to sovereign energy, along with, of course, electric vehicles for transport. The thing is, it doesn't mean Tesla can move any faster. However, it might mean that all other EVs increase in price, as demand goes through the roof, the same roof that oil prices also went through. Well, if the Chinese are able to raise the prices of their EVs by about $5,000, I think some of them could get close to a net profit, even if they're at half volume production. Except the thing is, despite what so many people think, well, the Chinese EVs, they don't make a fraction of as many as you think. The biggest selling Chinese EVs have tiny batteries and are not legal for sale in any developed nation, so we aren't really going to be able to see any big numbers there. Besides, it's about batteries anyway, so it would make sense to focus on how many battery factories are being made. I think these oil prices have got to be killing legacy autos now. I mean, even when gas prices return, the ICE driver will never know what the price of gas might be tomorrow. Do you get it? If gas goes up too much, ICE just became about $2,000 to $3,000 more expensive to run every year than it did last year, thus making EVs that much better value. Demand for ICE down, moving to EVs. Higher demand means that EVs can raise prices. In other words, some EV companies might make a profit. Well, only the Chinese ones potentially. But again, it doesn't mean they can make them any faster. Even if they build extra auto factories, it doesn't make any difference. It's still the batteries we have to wait for. Global currencies are in question. Foreign reserves are not guaranteed. What will nations use for their reserve? If the US will renege on treasury bonds with Russia, well, what's to stop them not honouring them for China? A big wake-up call to China's trillions of US dollars in their foreign exchange reserves. And I think this is it. The world needs a new global-based currency. The US dollar is America's. They get to control it. Every time the US prints money and it deflates the currency, well, it's not just US citizens paying for it, like most nations with their currencies. No, the entire world has to pay for the US printing, as the likes of China's reserves are diluted when the US money supply increases. Yes, America has actually been getting away with this for a really long time. America gets to buy everything and just pay for it with debt. On a macro level, Japan makes cars for America, America prints some more dollars and gives it to Japan. Does that sound fair? This was Bretton Woods. What a deal. And these nations have had enough of this, particularly as America stole all their gold. All these nations need to do is change their reserve currency. They can use their US dollars and spend it all on Bitcoin. Right now, all these nations can use their US dollar reserves and change them to Bitcoin reserve. I would say it would just take one reasonably sized nation to start all this and likely result in a domino effect. The question is, at what stage would the US decide it wants its reserves in Bitcoin too, and potentially start printing dollars to buy Bitcoin, which would mean the dollar hyperinflated and potentially the US is left with just Bitcoin as a currency? I'm not sure how this will all work. If this occurred, then the dollar just lost its value and would benefit the majority of the middle class who carry mortgages, but not good for the poor who have their savings in cash. Where the economy would be at that stage, though, I am uncertain. Tesla is aligned perfectly for these movements. With decentralized transport and energy, along with the whole climate change movement, we know Tesla didn't have a demand problem before, but now it probably would. This would be too much demand. Governments may finally look to Tesla and ask, what can they do to help? Russian oligarchs aside, we could see the largest transfer of wealth in our lifetime. If over this decade we find out that Tesla fanboys and Bitcoin maximalists were right, then these hodlers will be holding the majority of the world's wealth. The Tesla community, and from what I can tell, the Bitcoin too, overall seems to have a narrative of wanting the world to be better. We could see these communities now controlling all the world's money and energy, deciding on how we allocate resources. I really hope to see actions from Tesla or Teslanaires, like building solar and battery farms for sub-Saharan Africa to give them free power, rather than building higher and more exorbitant ivory towers. Decentralize the world's energy and wealth, take it out of the handfuls of a concentrated elite, and there'll be so much more to go around. Maybe I'm an optimist, but given the times we're in now, I don't think I could cope any other way. Lots of doom and gloom for sure. But this is a transition, this is change. Change is not easy. But we may end up seeing a world with decentralized finance and abundant renewable energy, thus also creating more world peace. If it hadn't been for Tesla and Bitcoin, then I wouldn't have so much hope for the world. I can't predict the future, I don't know what will happen, but I can prepare for it as best I can by running potential scenarios. Of course, I specialize in EVs and Tesla, so I look at this through that lens. But very interested on all your thoughts too. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.